I'd like to call to order the Policy Committee for Community Unit School District 303 at 5 p.m. on April 8th, 2024. And first up is citizen comments. Do we have any? Okay. All right. You gonna read it?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. Okay, during the public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with respect and civility towards others. Please note that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district and on behalf of our students, staff, families, and community members. Thank you.
And our first and only speaker up is Victoria Contreras, and it is on the illness policy.
Yep.
Disturbing stories came up on Friday, and I wanted to make you guys aware of them. So, as a law-abiding resident of St. Charles, whose taxes pay our salaries and support our schools, I have some serious concerns and questions about illegal aliens being bussed into our county and the impact they will have on our schools. I am the child of an immigrant family who came here lawfully. It took them 8 years to get their papers to come, and they were vetted and they went through Ellis Island and were given a clean bill of health before being allowed into this country. These poor families that have been incentivized to break our law and come here have no idea what is going on. They have not been vetted nor given health exams, and I'm sure you're aware of the recent article from the Chicago Department of Public Health saying that illegal aliens are bringing in third world diseases that we haven't seen in here for years or decades. Some of the diseases that are on the rise, leprosy. Can you believe that? Leprosy is now here in our country. Polio, malaria, tuberculosis, and measles. And yes, you can still contract measles even if you have been vaccinated. TB is an antibiotic-resistant bacteria that can survive on carpet for 19 days if it's coughed upon. Also, it can survive on wood surfaces like desks, our children's desks, for 88 days and still be viable. And in moist soil, up to 4 weeks, like our playgrounds. What are your policies regarding the health status of children of illegals in the St. Charles schools? Will they be held to the same standards as our children? The Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Health requires our children in all new transfers to have physicals, dental exams, eye exams at their own expense. Who is making sure they have a clean bill of health before attending our schools? Who is paying for these exams and the necessary medical bills, housing, clothing, school supplies, and the list goes on? Will you be asking us, the legal residents, for a tax increase to pay for all this? Your job's to focus on providing rigorous education. However, your policies on illegals could endanger our children. In our culture, if a child is sick, they stay home from school. We have every right to expect that they will not be exposed to these third world diseases that are being brought in, that we don't have immunity for. So I ask, what is your health status policy for these people? And where can I find a copy of it in writing? It is here now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And from that, we will move on to our 4 discussion items. First discussion item is 2A Policy 2-220 School Board Meeting Procedure.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. This is really in reference to the subsection quorum and participation by audio or video means. On mine, it's the 3rd page. And it's really focused in on a board member requesting access to participate in a board meeting or committee meeting via Zoom or whatever the tools necessary for that person to participate. Press has opened that up a little bit more for greater flexibility to allow for board members to participate through that. One of the asks was for the policy committee to come back and really review that again. What the policy co-chairs and the team recommended adding a sentence to the policy indicating that the board member gives at least 1 hour's notice to request her participation in meeting via Zoom. This will allow the IT team to be able to prepare the technology and be ready to set up. Just more of a simple ask, so our team is ready and prepared, so they're not scrambling at the last moment regarding that request. Chairs?
The only thing I would add is I think that you had said historically you're receiving much longer time frames of that. People aren't calling you with 30 minutes remaining, so we just felt that everyone had already been giving that courtesy, usually 24 hours in advance, but that it may not be possible in the event that it's an hour or, or less of notice.
Correct. Anytime that we've received it over the last year, 8 months, it's always been with plenty of time. But we do recognize that it does take considerable amount of effort by our IT team to get everything set up and ready to go, and making sure that it's useful for both the board member who's online and the board who sits here.
So with that, are there any questions, comments, concerns from other board members?
In that, I think the previous policy, right, was work or another obligation, right? And I mean, my only concern is I don't want this policy to be abused. Like, I don't think this board would abuse it, but like that's a concern. Is I think there's something to be said for us having a quorum in person here. And I know as actually having taken one Zoom meeting, I think I give multiple months in advance on that. So not necessarily concerned about that, but I just, I don't know if there's anything in there that about, number of absences or, something along those lines.
There's nothing in the current policy from press or what the chairs or myself added into it. You're right, I think it's still that personal obligation as a board member to be here as often as possible. I would see that in my former positions in different districts where the board president would, if there was a concern about a board member, that the board president would reach out to that individual or individuals and have that conversation, and it would be handled in that manner. And then if there are other issues cropping up, then the board could have other conversations.
So a couple of things. I guess first, I believe we're required to have a quorum in person. So that is a requirement, would be a concern if it became an issue. And then my second ask, could you read again then, what we're actually saying the policy would become?
Yes, I'll read from provided a quorum is physically present, a board member may attend a meeting by video or audio conference if she is prevented from physically attending because of 1, personal illness or disability, 2, employment or district business, 3, a family or other emergency, or number 4, unexpected child care obligations. If a member wishes to attend a meeting by video or audio, he or she must notify the recording secretary or superintendent at least 24 hours before the meeting unless advance notice is impractical. However, at least 1 hour's notice is required in order for the IT team to effectively set up the technology. And that, where we put in that next sentence, starting with however at least 1 hour, is because of the 24 hours before the meeting unless advance notice is impractical. And we're like, there's got to be a cutoff point for our team to be able to do the work itself to make all this magic happen.
My only
only question would be what other districts do, and if they have something similar, then, I mean, I don't see why we shouldn't put in something in place that makes it more feasible for our IT staff, because we don't want to put them at an inconvenience or behind the 8 ball.
We felt like the hour when we literally asked them, and they're like, as long as we've got an hour, we can make this thing work. Anything less than that, it really is putting them in a bad spot.
That was in the planning meeting, that was the discussion we had, as we said, that we wanted to make sure that, where feasible, obviously, if somebody can give advance notice, and I think we've normally gotten that. But that was the question, was how long does it take to actually set up to do this without potentially, you know, we've had some glitches at the beginning of meetings, and I think sometimes it, you know, tied into the idea of having somebody remotely. So when that, you know, sometimes the volume's way up, the volume's way down, whatever it is, or we're not hearing people. So for them to be able to test and vet and make sure the system is working, that was kind of what we had determined was what they needed time-wise. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. All right, that being said, then, next up is policy 7:7:60, residents.
Perfect. We'll move 22202 to consent for the next board meeting. Are you okay with that?
I'm sorry, yes, consent, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Apologies.
Policy 760. So this is the Illinois School Code now allows board to adopt a policy to waive non-residential tuition if the student is the child of a district employee. We're required to select one of the two questions. Administration is recommending to the board, and policy committee agreed with this, that we say no to this. There are a lot of we looked at it from a financial standpoint, bringing students in from other districts because they are the child of a district employee. I think it could be a nice benefit. However, I don't know if it would offset the financial cost that the board would be taking on for those students to be coming to our district. Policy members?
We also just briefly discussed kind of the space constraints.
Thank you.
Naturally, we just came through all of the space allocation throughout our district, so we felt that, you know, at this time, given that we are certainly overburdened at some schools, and we felt that that was a pretty important variable as well.
Just real quick, when you say the check which option, where does that, just for the folks at home, where does that checking the option, who are we checking it to, and
Yeah,
where
so
does it go?
all of our policies are done through an organization called Press. So what Tammy will do is, after the board gives approval at the next board meeting, she'll go in and literally select, and it will tell Press which policy that we're selecting. So within this one, we'll say, if the board agrees with our recommendation, we'll select no, so they'll remove that aspect from the policy. So that's how the yes/no questions or select one of the two questions works. But again, Tammy will go back in, select it, and then it'll go up to that organization, which then will input it into our new press packet,
Got it.
policy packet.
Thank you.
So to clarify, if this is put on consent agenda, a yes vote will be to go to no as a default?
Yes.
Do we have any non-resident students today?
Say it again.
Do we have any non-resident students today?
None that fall within this category. There may be because of McKenty-Vento,
Okay,
but not from any other situation where
related to
we're,
this.
bringing students in outside of that,
okay.
outside of that lens.
The only other thing that I think that sort of applies to is if children have two custodial parents and one lives outside of the
Correct.
district, whereas they're not really outside of our district, but they may be outside of our district at a different home a couple days a week, or whatever their agreement is.
Yeah.
But that would be the only thing that I could think of.
Yeah, with that situation, the family generally selects the home, which parent is the majority of the time, and they'll select that as theirs.
Yeah, and in that case, I think we discussed that, and in that case, I think they have chosen what their district is. So if
Yep.
they were to say, you know, one parent lives in Wheaton and one lives here, they would have to pick a district based upon their residency of the child, so. Okay, so I'll say consent for that. And, next up is policy 7:160, student appearance.
This was recommended to be brought back to the policy co-chairs for review. At this time, the policy committee co-chairs administration suggests that the district create a procedure and include it in the student handbook. The procedure would include a form that the student and parents would complete explaining the reason that the student would like to modify their graduation attire. Again, it would connect to their religious beliefs, would be the only reason why that we would potentially make a change to the graduation attire. But we felt like having it in writing in their handbook was the best way for us to clearly communicate that there is a request and that it would go to the school, would it meet the needs or the requirements set forth by our procedure.
Questions, comments, concerns?
I would just be
No.
curious who would be reviewing those requests? Does it go to their principal or?
Yes, they would go to the
Then
high
we'd
school
administ-
principal.
Okay.
Audra Christensen, Dr. Audra Christensen would also be a part of that conversation. So you'd have a district lens and a school lens.
Thank you for that clarification.
We also briefly discussed kind of a deadline for submission. Paul, can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Say that again, sorry.
The timeframe for approval? that
Yes.
They would have to submit their request?
Yes. So one of those pieces that why we'd want it in the handbook and it would be released early is to get it approved much sooner. So we were talking about in that early second part of that semester to have that taken care of. So we're able to work through that and have all clear communication to the family and the student way before graduation time occurs. Thank you for that.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right, so I would suggest that goes on to consent as well. Next up is policy 7:190, student behavior.
So this one was pulled back for the plagiarism, really a question around what are we doing with students who do engage in academic dishonesty. They do receive a 0 on the assignment with the expectation for authentically completing, and that's really important there, the authentically completing the assigned assignment for credit. Staff members work with the student individually to discuss what plagiarism is unacceptable as well as ways to avoid it in the future. The incident is documented through the referral system, but the consequence is an academic and not disciplinary in nature. This is a process for plagiarism regardless of the source, be it AI generated or other forms of plagiarism. Christine, anything on that you, did I cover it?
You covered all of it.
Okay.
Was there any separate discussion? I know like we had a discussion at the table last time about the AI aspect of it. There are certainly some tools that are out there that, people
Oh, yeah,
have been
thank
putting
you.
original works in them and
Yeah.
them coming back as plagiarized, even though they are original works. This is still a tricky area, and I know
It
that
is.
language is still in there. So how are we kind of addressing that?
One of the ways we're addressing it is by the tools that we have at the secondary level around Turnitin. What it will do is check for AI-generated content. As I sat and spoke with the department chair and principal about this, it will come back and say there is 5% AI-generated in there. It will give you a percentage. They've seen somewhere in the neighborhood 95% generated where they're having those conversations. So the tool that we have to check for that because it was used from a traditional plagiarism where students are taking content directly out of already printed resources in research to it's now capable of identifying AI generated plagiarism as well, where they're just cutting and pasting.
So, for clarity on that, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
For clarity on that, I think, is it it says some percentage of the work is AI, or is it saying there is some percent chance that this is generated?
Good question. It's highly accurate in saying 5% of this was generated by AI, not, there's a 5% chance that it was AI generated. Christine?
I think what I wanted to just kind of talk through is that as we all work through AI and what it means and how does that play out, we'll be continuing to, as each one of these comes up, walk through it, make sure we fully understand the issue. That's one of the nice things about our discipline policy is it's not a if this then that. It's a help us understand the context, help us understand what's happened so that we can get a sense of what really happened here, what didn't really happen here. And we'll continue to, I know I'm meeting with a group of administrators around the Midwest to have a conversation around, well, what is your AI policy and how are you helping support kids and how do I do this appropriately? When do I use it and how do I do those things? So I think it's something that will continue to evolve as we continue to learn.
Thank you, Christine. That's kind of what I was looking for, is that piece of it, right? That it's not just hey, we're gonna get an answer back. It's gonna say this is all plagiarized or it's AI generated and now the student's subject to disciplinary action or, so I think that's important. The other question that I have is a follow-on. So if we're using Turnitin, does Turnitin have the ability for us to provide feedback on their model and the AI that they're using? So let's say something comes back, it is mostly generated, and then we go through our process, the student comes back and said, I wrote this, right? And they can demonstrate that it is an original work. Is there a way for us to give them feedback so that they can improve their tool and then also
I'll
that we
ask.
can...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but, and it's been a little bit since I've used Turnitin, but in my experience, it just kind of lets you know when it's starting to see that this work has been someplace else. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's plagiarism, because if
Right.
I've accurately cited it, then it's not plagiarism. So it's really about where do you see that, and then where has it been officially cited or not cited. So there's a couple of steps in there that we're always looking for.
Yeah, I know some teachers have gotten pretty creative of embedding prompts within their assignments, right? So students will they'll literally copy paste the whole assignment in, and they don't realize that the teacher has inserted a prompt in somewhere to put a specific sentence or other things, so.
I think the difference is that, my experience with plagiarism checkers is it will tell you, this is the website this came from, here's the link to that website, you can read what that kid submitted. But with AI, nobody has necessarily submitted it before. And so it's not necessarily gonna find it somewhere else, but it's going to say,
100%.
this is generated by AI based upon their other.
There's certain structures and sentences and other things, the way the models come back and
Yeah.
provide it.
And so I don't know, but I would imagine, I would hope there'd be a way for us to provide feedback, because isn't that kind of the way AI works, is you give it information and then
So it's learning.
so.
So we'll look into that, but we're recommending this policy go forward for approval.
So AI plagiarism is just one kind of cheating, if we want to call it such. There are many others. How does this policy change interact with any of the other academic honesty or anti-academic fraud policies that are in place?
Yeah, really what I would say is that we've always had an academic dishonesty policy, and AI falls under that policy. So it's really, nothing is changing about that policy. We're just applying our academic dishonesty policy to whether regardless of how the plagiarism occurred.
I guess just the last little piece I'll add is kind of something that the two of you were alluding to over there, as we just discussed a little bit more education for the students on how to appropriately cite AI work, right? They may not understand that they're plagiarizing or utilizing something that isn't their own authentic work, and just give a little bit more emphasis on how to do that appropriately, so that, because like you said, Christine, there's going to be a lot of projects that integrate AI, and it's part of the process, and as long as they know how to utilize and cite the information that they have utilized, then it's appropriate.
Could you maybe explain how in the board packet this coincides with the required question related to this? Because I was a little confused.
Oh, under the building principal must notify the student's parents, guardians only when the alleged offense is a firearm possession, that aspect of it. So yeah, this is fairly comprehensive policy, and this was an aspect that we discussed at the previous policy meeting, but it really is around, the policy expands this notification duty to include drug-related incidents in battery of a staff member. Would the board like to expand the notification duty? So it literally is just the expansion of the information we're sharing with the families in those two categories. Does that make sense?
Well, in theory, yes, but how does that tie into the discussion we just had about AI and plagiarism? Are we looking to expand it to notification of the parents with regards to AI plagiarism?
Yeah, so, yes and no. So when this policy got pulled back, we still had to answer the required question, which we had some consensus over, but as we brought it back, we still needed to make sure we had confirmation on answering the required question. Around the piece that I just spoke about, do we expand the notification duty to include drug-related or align notification duty to that school code there?
So to approve this policy, we would be expanding the notification duty?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be sure.
But just to be clear, because it was discipline, this was a piece that we pulled out specifically around trying to find more information there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Okay, with, Mr. Boucher, I think that should go to, consent? Okay, then, consent it is. All right, next up is policy 7270, administering medicines to students.
So this one is again around the distribution of medicine by all our nurses and resource officers have been trained on how to administer opioid and EpiPens through the health department. Administration is recommending that we do not have an designated supply of oxygen tanks. So that's one of the big pieces here is, do we store oxygen tanks on our premises? We don't believe we should be. Generally speaking, if a student is in a medically fragile case, that will be a part of that student's medical records, and they will be bringing those oxygen tanks to the schools. Christine, anything else on this piece that you want to?
No, I think probably the biggest piece is this is really about those undesignated. So it's not a
Yep.
student with a script for oxygen. It's keeping them on site for somebody who might need it. And so I think there's just a slight difference. If a student has a prescription for it and needs it, we will absolutely
We'll
have
absolutely have it.
How do we reconcile that, though, with undesignated EpiPens, out of curiosity? Because that as well requires a prescription, a specific
it. Yep.
dosage, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think really where that comes from is the idea that an EpiPen, a kid at any moment in time can have an allergic reaction, whether we've known about it or not. And so we keep them there to have that as a way to help support that piece. With the oxygen, it's hard to envision what we would need or why we would need to keep undesignated oxygen tanks around for a student.
Okay, so we have not observed a need.
We have not.
And we have reviewed this with our
Our
health
nurse
personnel?
Yep, we sure have.
Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's a very different medical intervention than an EpiPen, right? And paramedics have oxygen on when they come, and when we call 911, the ambulance is part of that process, so I don't see why we would need it.
I think one other thing we talked about was that we would intentionally select the language of may in the event that we figured in the future that we might need to integrate it. So we're not saying that there will never be an instance where that's the case. So we kind of erred on the side of caution and used may in case we do need to get them on site.
Do we have an idea of the cost of it, just for all of our buildings and everything else, like?
For the oxygen?
Yeah.
I believe that this falls into the same category as Epi and Narcan in that it is free to us from the health department. They go out and get the undesignated prescriptions for us, and then they provide us with the information, or
Okay.
with the medication.
Can we confirm that too?
For the oxygen?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I sure can.
Even if, even still, it is,
Yeah,
I know
I-
that it's somewhat negligible.
Yeah, no, that was
Relatively
another
speaking.
concern, right, is just the maintenance of it, the other things, I mean, oxygen it's, yeah, it's a
Ma-
rocket.
Maintenance of an oxygen tank is pretty much leave it alone.
Yeah,
It's-
that's,
So any other? Okay, then I will suggest that goes to consent. Okay, so, up next is, policy 6230, library media program.
Okay, as a policy committee brought this back for review, the policy committee team and administration recommend that the board stick with the current iteration of the policy. However, our legal team has reviewed that question. They are going to be meeting with the press committee, where they bring different legal entities to the table to review that. This question has been asked by a number of districts, not just ours. Again, same question is, can we maintain our current policy and still check that we're in compliance with it? Because from earlier iterations of this, with our legal counsel, they were saying, yes, we can change our policy and still select. But as we continue to push back, they said, okay, we're gonna go to the larger press committee to bring this conversation to the table. And it was good to hear that we're not the only district. There's many districts who are a little bit confused with the two-question response and the ability to change your policy, because there weren't in great alignment with what we understood what the state's looking for us to do.
got it, so this falls back into my question about the two buttons for the policy. Who are we pushing that for? It's for press to update our
Correct.
documentation.
Correct, because we don't actually change our own policies, they do, so once you made that selection, it goes up there. But that's why we need to ask the question, what are we selecting here? Because it doesn't make sense if we're changing something and still hitting one of those buttons. So we should have that back in probably 2 weeks, is when that committee meeting is being held. So again, this one would be tabled one more time until we have greater information from this committee. It would be administration's recommendation.
I think a little bit of context to the discussion that we had regarding this particular policy was that, one, it's very infrequently used. Right? We're not seeing this happen very often, which is one of the reasons why we felt that our current policy was working. It gave an opportunity for us to vet any of the materials. It gave folks an opportunity to come forward and request said vetting. And so it was one of those very technical term, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing, if it's working. And so we just want to make sure, again, that we're compliant with the requirements, but our policy seems to be working.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, well, that is our final item. Next up then would be future agenda items.
It would be,
Am I missing something?
we'll bring this one back if it's in timely, because we're on for
sorry,
April 29th. And at that time, we'll have the student behavior handbook in front of you.
Okay.
Aubrey Schuett will be joining us to review that. That's an annual review, so that will occur on the 29th.
Right, there's no recommendation for meeting because we're tabling this.
Yep.
So, any future agenda items that we need to? Okay, other than this. All right.
What time is the meeting on the 29th?
I think we put them at 5 o'clock now, right?
And then business services is still at 5:30? Okay,
Yes, 5:30 or after.
okay, thank you.
Okay, and I guess, at 5:35, we will be adjourning the meeting. Thank you.
2024 regular meeting of the school board at 6:00 PM. Ms. Marsan, would you please take roll?
Mrs. Bell,
Here.
Mr. Kuschert,
Here.
Mr. Lackner,
Here.
Mr. Lentz,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe is absent today, Mr. McNally,
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Here, please stand for the pledge to the flag. Okay, and next, moving on the agenda, we'll start with the reports to the board. So Dr. Gordon, can you provide the superintendent's update?
Absolutely. Tonight, we will be sharing the first in a series of videos with the board and our community that highlight recent activities from across D303. We intend to provide these videos at each of our regular board meetings throughout the school year. Highlights will include previous month's student and staff accomplishments, classroom activities and events. Videos are developed and produced by our communications departments, and the highlights you see are shared in various ways across our social media platforms. For our first video, we've included highlights from the beginning of the calendar year to date. With that,
when we talk about different type of aircraft, based on how much you can lift or pull up.
One, two, three. Ooh, not bad.
so our videos are one way for us to be able to show the board, the community, all the amazing things that are happening across our district that we wouldn't be able to in any other format, to be able to hear about all of our national certified teachers, mock trial, robotics clubs, the different teams attending state, community members coming in to read to our students in different activities. We really felt like this was just a unique way of being able to show the board and our community in a short fashion what's happening, a little glimpse inside of our schools. So we'll continue doing that. My team, the Redling team, Mr. Lentz all attended the Ed Foundation event last Friday evening. Really, those grants are really important to many of the dollars that are raised go to our teachers for various causes that they're submitting for. So it was just a really nice event occurring. Continuing with our transition planning, just a note on everybody's calendar, the Lincoln celebration is May 10th. This is the 95th anniversary celebration at Lincoln on Friday, May 10th. The event begins at 5 p.m. and open to alumni, former staff, and community. An event for current families begins at 6 p.m. So we're excited about that that celebration. And then we have returning student registration. This is really an important time for us. Returning students registration opens later this month. Postcard reminder should be arriving in the mailboxes next week for our families. Mrs. Feargreave, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gordon. We'll move to board member reports on committee. Let's go ahead and, would you like to start with the policy committee?
Let me just get to my notes here real quickly. Hold, please. I write a lot of notes. Well, what I can say is that we definitely discussed quite a few of those items that we had discussed at the prior meeting as well. As soon as I get to this, it will be very helpful for everybody. Can we skip me for a second, Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Of course,
Thank you.
of course. Business services?
Sure. Business Services met on Thursday, March 21st with a full agenda. There's several different things we'll go through that you'll see on the consent agenda tonight and a couple for action as well. It began with a review of the Mid-Valley Financial Report for February, and there were no areas of concern there. We also had a review from Melissa Mader on the D303 financial report, and she explained the new format of the report to the committee. I know, Mr. Lentz, you wanted to share something regarding that new format and why that's so valuable to us?
It's just a different look for the budget to hopefully provide a little bit more visibility and transparency to the community. So I was very excited to see it. And thanks, Justin and the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. We also discussed the amended budget for fiscal year 2024. That amended budget reflects changes from the capital plan as well as some capital purchases. There will be a public hearing scheduled for the June 10th board meeting for that budget review. We also had a long presentation and conversation about the finance groups, business services groups, look at a department-by-department review of all of the budgets at the line item level, and a new way to look at that budgeting process for our operating budget within each one of the different departments. We started with a review of the business office and talked very deeply about how to ensure that every one of the departments within the district is focused on optimizing their spend. During the discussion, board members asked about how other districts manage their budgets, how they think about their FTE numbers in every one of the different departments. And this budget review will be an ongoing topic that will be discussed again, not only at the April 29th Business Services meeting, but over the course of the next calendar year. There were several different things that will show up in the consent agenda. There was a review of the copy paper bid, a review of the high school food service contract, and there was also, for action tonight, a review of the athletic towel service bid recommendation. Mr. Lynch, you wanted to mention something here?
That one will be on our decisions for tonight. Ms. Marsan will go through that, but we're gonna, we've moved out of it to reject all the bids. So that's the motion that we'll see tonight. A little confusing, but.
We had a discussion of the 5-year capital improvement plan. Mrs. Stuber shared that with the group, and we've agreed to review that at least yearly with updates coming. There were several different discussions around the addendum to the Haynes Park District Agreement, review of the Richmond front parking lot improvements, the Haynes playground labor and installation bid, replacements of AEDs throughout the district, site improvements for Lincoln and Haynes, and then a review of the annual district technology renewals, things like Gaggle and Read Write, SnapVerter, and a couple of other programs, and then as well, an update associated with the student information system selection process. All of those will show up on the consent agenda, and if everyone would like further details associated with any of those items, they can go back and review that Business Services Committee meeting via YouTube.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner and Mr. Lentz.
I'm ready.
Okay, go
Okay,
ahead.
so one of the reasons why I didn't have an update for you is we actually covered the update from the January 29th policy meeting. I thought I was losing my mind here for a second. I'm like, where are my notes? But we covered that on the March 11th meeting, and then the 7 items that were pulled from the consent were then discussed again tonight, 6 of which have been moved to consent agenda, and 1 of which will be discussed further when we get additional feedback. So, sorry for the confusion, everyone who is listening at home as well. But I can pop into L&T if we're ready for that. Okay, so L&T met back on Monday, March 18th. As with all of our meetings, we recommend that you go back and take a look at the recordings that are available for everybody's viewing pleasure. We started with a professional learning communities in action, so PLCs in action, and specifically we were speaking about how to better inform instructional strategies. So what kind of trends are we seeing in the data? What misconceptions are we seeing in the student work? Instructional practices that students are responding to, and then what strategies do we need to adjust. There is a great presentation also available on the website, so please take a look at that, as you know, we're very excited about the PLC work that is ongoing and looking forward to seeing its continued effectiveness. We then went to transition support for the boundary changes. So as everybody is well aware, we came out of the attendance boundary process. And so the L&T team has tailored professional development opportunities to support educators, since there'll be notably some level changes, grade level changes at the elementary level. This will be rolled out in 2 phases. Phase 1 is an opportunity for observation of the classrooms, as well as collaboration with existing teachers and instructional support coaches. And then phase 2, educators will be permitted to enroll in content curriculum courses that will help better familiarize them not only with priority standards, but also the curriculum resources that they may or may not be familiar with. Anything I'm missing on that? Okay. We then did a summer school overview. So as most folks are aware, we're going to be trying out a summer school program this upcoming summer, 2024, for elementary summer school students. It will be hosted at Anderson Elementary. Transportation will be provided. The academic focus will be primarily on ELA and math, with utilizing Wonders resource for ELA and Eureka for math. Invitations will be sent out this spring, I think shortly, if I'm not mistaken, Paul. And then an evaluation of the effectiveness of the program will be done once the performance of those students have been evaluated. And we'll basically be comparing and contrasting them against comparable students that chose not to engage in the summer school programming, so we can compare like to like. And then from there, the board and the administration will discuss the effectiveness, the cost, and determine future offerings. Last couple of things, and then I'll stop talking. We went over some STEM resources, engaged in the thorough review process, the CAI process, as we've discussed quite a bit. That's curriculum assessment and instruction for those listening at home. The recommendation was Project Lead the Way as the primary resources, and Inner Orbit as the supplemental assessment resource. We then went on to resource renewal for K-12, and these are just simply previously board-approved resources that are updated annually. And then the last thing we discussed was student international travel and the recommendation for approval of an AP European history trip. I believe that was June 24th through July 1st. Our next meeting will be next Monday, April 15th at 5:30. It will sure to be a riveting one, so don't miss it.
Thank you for both of those updates. I believe that concludes all of our committee meeting updates. So we'll now move to citizen comments on the agenda. We do have comments this evening, so Mr. Lackner, would you please read the preamble?
During the public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with respect and civility toward others. Please note that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district on behalf of our students, families, staff, and community members. Thank you.
And before we begin, just to the tech team, I'm getting feedback that the volume is pretty low, I guess, on the live version. So anything we can do about that. Okay, our first citizen is Ms. Sadie Kendra.
My name is Sadie Kendra. I'm a freshman who attends St. Charles East High School. Today I'm here with concerns about our English curriculum and the changes you're planning to make. I believe that this will have a negative impact on students. I've spoken with other students about this issue and collaborated with some who couldn't be here tonight. One senior at St. Charles D said, "I believe that these freshman level English courses are not only well selected, but also incredibly useful in understanding the values in human nature. Not only that, but the honors level courses allow students to take a deeper look at these themes and their influence, which makes it all an incredibly vital part of their learning. Not only are students against this change, but other teachers are as well. During the past few years, test scores have been declining. From 2017 to 2023, SAT reading scores have decreased by 24 points. We understand that this is your main reason for choosing the Common Lit curriculum, since it focuses solely on building skills that help with standardized testing. Test scores will theoretically increase. However, test scores are not the only things that matter, and one of the reasons why test scores are declining is due to the failure to build fundamental skills during COVID. Teachers can address these underlying issues better than Common Lit can. Common Lit also claims to be adaptable to students. This adaptability doesn't work like other programs such as iReady. It only simplifies the texts for students. Common Lit will not be able to enrich honors students. It will only cover skills that honors students have already mastered. Differentiation, one of the 3 pillars of individualized learning, refers to adjusting curriculums and assignments for classes or individual students. This is crucial to helping honor students not only stay engaged, but flourish, and something that Common Lit cannot achieve. Online curriculums don't work for every student, and we have a right to options in our learning. You wouldn't put someone who struggles to meet grade level standards into AP literature, so I put honors students into standard level classes. Teachers are irreplaceable as they act as mentors and coaches to students. They help students by teaching individuality and building skills. Common Lit won't allow students to read classic works of literature such as 1984 and Romeo and Juliet, but it will give every student the exact same path, despite our differences. Is this really what we want for our future?
Thank you very much. Our next comment is from Ms. Elizabeth Lang.
I will probably be reading from here so I can fit everything in, so I apologize for the lack of eye contact. But my name is Elizabeth Lang, and I have 3 children in the D303 school system. My first question for everyone tonight is, what are your plans for inclusion, and how are you going to support staff and students in these changes? Many are aware of the shifts that have already taken place, but many express that they are unaware of a plan. In pages 48 and 49 of the book, The Way to Inclusion, co-written by our superintendent, Dr. Paul Gordon, it states the importance of providing staff and families with a clear vision for inclusion and how students and families will be supported through the change. It highlights effective communication skills as being vital to the process. As an occupational therapist and mother to 2 children with IEPs and 1 with a serious food allergy, I am a strong advocate of as much inclusion as possible and as appropriate, which is supported by IDEA. This means there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to supports and services for each child's specific needs. The Way to Inclusion, again, a book written by Dr. Paul Gordon, discourages providing any sort of service outside of the general education classroom. My son has a severe to moderate speech delay. Evidence-based research and communication with professionals has proven that his progress would be greatly hindered by services pushed into the classroom. He requires quiet one-on-one spaces to listen and practice. Some children's needs call for supplementary learning environments. And when we make changes to the systems and programs in our schools, we need to support and prepare our staff and students in classrooms that are already at capacity and overwhelmed. I, along with other D303 parents, have developed a petition requesting support in the classroom in the form of budgeting for increased staff, decreased class size, training for teachers, time for interprofessional planning and collaborating, and dedicated quiet spaces of respite, also known as multisensory rooms in every school. We desire for all of our children to have equal access, space, and time for learning in our schools. My second concern is the need for better security measures and supervision in unstructured spaces. It's no surprise to any parent the lack of supervision on playgrounds, bathrooms, entrances, and buses. In our petition, we requested, at the minimum, cameras at every entrance, overlooking playgrounds and outside of bathrooms to track who was inside during times that inappropriate behavior occurred. I know of at least one school that has had 0 security cameras. In a day and age when our children are sitting ducks, but technology is so much so that my own chickens and dogs at home have cameras watching over them, we must do better. I'm sure we could all agree that the most inappropriate verbal and physical contact occurs on our playgrounds. The stories are endless, and to be frank, they're dangerous and disturbing. There's not enough supervisors here, nor do they have the proper ongoing training to deal with many of these situations. We need a district-wide supervisor to student ratio that's sufficient and will keep our students safe. Please consider our pleas for staff support, safe schools, and equitable education for our children and teachers.
Thank you. Our final citizen comment from Ms. Michelle Johnson.
Hello, my name is Michelle Johnson. I have 2 kids in the D303 district. So I heard that there had been some negative feedback about the symbol that Richmond had used for their core principle of inclusivity. It was a rainbow inside of a heart. I think that there is a lack of knowledge when it comes to the definition of inclusivity within the context of public education. Inclusivity is when all children, regardless of their background, this doesn't just mean ethnicity or sexuality, this includes language, any sort of special needs, neurodiversity, that they have the opportunity to feel welcome and safe within their schools. And within Richmond, this rainbow to most kids is just that. It's a rainbow. But to the select few, it's going to be a beacon of light. Inclusivity is not pushing any type of narrative either. It's in place to try to promote diversity and equality, which is essential because our public education system was founded with one group in mind, and that would be white Christian families. So all we're trying to do is level the playing field. And when you come from the majority and inclusivity is incorporated, it's natural to be uncomfortable because we're forced to acknowledge marginalized communities and minority groups. But this is a tenet that has been decided for our school to have and for our district to have. So when we have somebody that's coming from the group of power and they feel uncomfortable about a rainbow, which they take to mean representing a certain marginalized community, and we take it down, that's the antithesis of inclusivity. And in fact, I think that it sends a very dangerous message to our community that we stand for inclusivity as long as it isn't convenient and as long as it doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. And I think with the big changes that everybody knows is going to happen next year, that it's really important for our school to stand by their core principles, but more importantly, that we put more value on our students feeling welcome and safe in their schools over adults feeling any discomfort.
Thank you very much for those comments and for everyone that took the time tonight for that. That concludes our citizen comments. Now we will move to section 4 on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 4A through 4V?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kuschert. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgreen.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Moving now to section 5 of the agenda, which is for action. Item A relates to the athletic towel service bid. Can I have a motion to reject all bids received for athletic and physical education towel service?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a
Second.
second? Thank you, Mr. Lackner. Any discussion or questions at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote? And again, just a reminder, this is for a motion to reject the current bids.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, the motion passes 6-0. Item B in the for action section is the 2024 to 2028 Mid-Valley Special Education Professional Agreement. Can I have a motion to approve the 2024 to 2028 Mid-Valley Special Education Professional Agreement?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kuschert. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. McNally. Any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item C, Mid-Valley Special Education Cooperative Articles of Joint Agreement. Can I have a motion to approve the Mid-Valley Special Education Cooperative Articles of Joint Agreement?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, please take the roll call vote.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. With that, moving to section 6, which is for information, there are 4 standing information items in your packet. The D303 financial report, our Mid-Valley financial report, Freedom of Information or FOIA Act requests, and district enrollment. Section 7 is new business. Is there any board member that would like to introduce new business at this time? Okay, the only item I would like to mention or make every board member and the community aware of, our next board meeting is on May 13th. And as part of that board meeting, we will also hold our annual organizational meeting as a board. So just want you to be prepared for that coming. Okay? Now we're at citizen comments, and there are no citizen comments at this time. So can I have a motion to adjourn the April 8th regular meeting of the school board?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McNally and Mr. Kuschert for the second. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0, and our meeting is adjourned at 6:28 p.m.